I have theory about the Austin Powers series that will shake you to your core and break you so utterly that by the end of it, you might just cry. For those not in the know, Austin Powers is a trilogy of films parodying the James Bond franchise, among other things. It was extremely popular around the year 2000 and is responsible for much of meme culture alongside things like SpongeBob and Shrek, which is another Mike Myers project. This series, though, is his magnum opus. He plays Austin Powers, a super 60s obsessed British spy parody, and also plays his rival, Dr. Evil, who's a parody of, well, he's exactly as funny and wild as his name suggests, and just look at him. They're some of the funniest, most well-produced comedies ever that actually still have valid stories and plot lines. The first film is about Austin Powers and Dr. Evil cryogenically freezing themselves in 1967 to fight in the 90s when there's more technology. But it's hilarious because they are 30 years out of their element and everything that comes with that, including Dr. Evil's angsty son. The second film features Dr. Evil trying to stop Powers before he can even try anything by time-traveling back to 1969 and extracting his so-called mojo while he was in cryogenic stasis, only for Austin to travel back too and try foiling the villain's plan to blow up the Earth alongside his miniature clone. In the third film, Dr. Evil wants to cause a global flood by enlisting another infamous villain, played by Myers, who's lost his absolute mind, and Austin tries stopping them with his father's help. It's all fantastic, but my theory will shatter both you and your understanding. Hello, I'm the Theorizer, fresh off the heels of 8 hours analyzing a fictional mouse lemur only to be thrust into this fuckery! Also, some good news. I found a way to get everyone notified about my new uploads. The answer? A third-party system. So there is now a free, yes, free, tier on my Patreon, where basically every time there's an update or a new video, you'll know about it. You don't have to pay, but of course there's still that option to get things early, get shoutouts and all the extra awesome stuff, that sort of thing. Their notifications, you see, have a 100% success rate of going out, which is great. But even more crazy is Austin Powers. We've already done a little recap of the Austin Powers films, but what still must happen before my theory can be fully comprehended is some sturdy confirmation of the timeline. This is especially difficult because of the time travel elements, and them even breaking the fourth wall to say, don't think about it too hard. Oh well, here we are. Okay, so based on all the flashbacks in the third movie, timing everything, comparing actor ages, it becomes very clear that Austin and Dr. Evil, who are ultimately revealed to be twin brothers, were both born around 1932. Based again on Michael Caine's age and the parallels, Nigel Powers must be born around 1897, which also times up with the birth date of his wife and Goldmember, whose real name is Johan van der Smut. Sometime when Dr. Evil and Austin are babies, Nigel and his wife are on vacation in Belgium, and assassins blow up their car with the mom and kids inside. Austin and Evil survive, but while Austin is found by his father, Dr. Evil is found in the shrubbery by a lunatic and his side chick, who raise him horribly for the next couple decades. Dr. Evil and Austin attend the same graduation school, and this starts their infamous rivalry, as they are coincidentally roommates. Perhaps those running the school knew something they didn't. Nigel do be oft sussy. Around 1967, Dr. Evil freezes himself and Austin follows suit. They then unfreeze 30 years later in 1997. The first film happens for them, but then the second film, they of course both travel back to 1969, where most of the second film occurs. This is where it should be noted that characters sort of time travel and shift all around when they need to, like the gargantuan Scotsman fleeing to the future, past, back and forth, etc. He's, yes, also portrayed by Mike Myers. We also see Dr. Evil's partner, Frau Fabricina, counting down the launch in 1969 in the volcano layer, but then suddenly on the moon as well. This is because this is the future Frau, who used this machine to travel back and help out here. See my point? Shifty AF. Anyways, the volcano and the moon stuff happen, and Austin accidentally clones himself with time travel antics, but everyone eventually returns to where they belong for the third movie, where Dr. Evil gets immediately captured for tipping his talent agency too far, probably with the Britney Spears fembot. And yet somehow Austin's father is apparently kidnapped by Mr. Johann van der Smut himself from the 70s. So Austin travels to the 70s, at which point Johann, Nigel, and Austin, plus one, travel back to the future for the rest of the third film to occur. The big trick here is what exactly goes on with Nigel. Well, I have figured it out. You see, Nigel didn't attend Austin's graduation, but also didn't attend his knighting. Nigel would be over 100 years old in the third film if this were all the case, but he's not. In fact, he's not even 80, which he would be if he were just in the 70s regularly and then kidnapped to the future or something. Also, the British intelligence doesn't question it much, meaning it's not like Austin just went back and met him in normal time. He's like mid-70s at most in the film. This means, I kid you not, that Nigel must have either been frozen and thawed alongside Austin, which makes sense, or was sent ahead from 1967 by Basil to help Austin in the future, right as he was frozen. Perhaps he took the car to the future to begin with, and then that enters a stable time loop. This is all pretty solid and sensible. Also, we know the rules. No changing the past. This is how Scott already had existed. Like, what happened then had always happened that way. It means basically the whole government remembers what happened, knows what will happen, and is okay with it. They kind of just go with it because they know they survive it. They need to preserve it, and it's funny, literally. Just like number 2 and Frau, everyone's surprisingly chill about Dr. Evil, and they allegedly knew Vanessa was a fembot all along. Alright, so what's my real theory exactly? In the 70s, Nigel and Goldmember of course meet and have an established connection. Nigel seems to know a great deal about him, and either Johann here kidnapped him for some reason, or Nigel was sent after him directly. Either way, the implication is that these two are a bit more connected, and brace yourself because I believe that they are rivals. Dare I say, the previous generation's Austin and Dr. Evil. They're the same age. Nigel hates the Dutch. They are both swingers introduced in the same movie with the same history. It's quite perfect. In retribution for something, probably in their long-standing rivalry, Johann ambushes Nigel on his trip to Belgium and, as Nigel says, blew up his car in an assassination attempt. I believe Goldmember killed Mrs. Powers in a revenge plot against Nigel. Yes, today is a day of reveals indeed. Immediately following this statement, Nigel begrudgingly beckons back to his statements about Dutch and Goldmember and says that the reason Dr. Evil was so unhinged was because his Belgian parents shared a border with the Dutch. It's him. It's the man himself. He was there. Dr. Evil was influenced in part by Johann van der Smut from afar. This is how it all connects into him attending the same school as Austin and how he knew to consult Goldie. Goldmember already had a damn time machine, and who names their adoptive kid Dr. Evil? Yes, even back in school, he was named that. Well, it's the lunatic himself. Dr. Evil ritualistically had his nuts sheared, and barring the literally golden member, that could have explained this eunuch perhaps? Nigel is devastated about his son, and no wonder. Johann killed Mrs. Powers and helped turn Dr. Evil to villainy to get back at his lifelong rival. If it weren't for a couple glaring errors, I'd even be inclined to say that Nigel is Johann's brother, fitting this whole duality theme, and there's gotta be some reason he keeps screaming father, faja, faja, long after he needs to, so damn. Johann van der Smut killed Mrs. Powers to get back at his lifelong rival. That there is my core theory, and I'm sure you have every reason to agree with it. Well, when am I going to push the limits? When am I going to press as hard as humanly possible? Well, just before we go off those rails, I have to explain one crucial possibility regarding all of the time travel confusion. Dr. Evil was tortured into evil, and so was Scott. We witness this process, and pitiably, Scott is aware of the coming madness early into the third film, when he says it's causing him serious psychological harm. He literally balds from the stress. I think there's a solid possibility that the Ministry and of course Verchicon lets this happen to preserve the timeline. I think all these damn characters treat their situation comedically because they've, well, In short, been driven insane by the time paradoxes. They preserve their own torture to keep themselves alive. It's just too much to fathom the cosmic joke that is their whole situation at this point. Who knows, fourth film could have involved Scott traveling back and driving Johan Vandersmut to madness to preserve the continuity. He's technically Austin's son, given Evil's mojo ingestion during conception. Dr. Evil's henchmen also make Mini-Me to torture Scott because they met him in the past. It's madness. This is why Austin's eyes cross and Basil keeps him out of the logic loop. They're more aware than they let on. That's why Dr. Evil had Austin briefly go back 10 minutes and save Felicity even though he'd won. It's because there's more to their timeline. But this logic and psychology can come harder on another day because all we need are those bare essentials for this gold-plated bombshell. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I think Nigel burnt off Johan's genitals for sleeping with his wife, so Goldmember lost his mind and tried to blow her up. Holy shit. I need a moment. This explains why Johan looks like Austin and Dr. Evil. He's their father! It was Mrs. Powers who took them on a trip to Belgium. Neat details, neatly mentioned. Also, they describe Johan's misfortune in the same cliche way as an unfortunate accident, as if that's what they're trained to say instead of the grisly truth. Because then what do we see midway through the third movie? He tries to burn Nigel back in an unfortunate accident. At least it can't get any crazier from here. Wait. Sometimes you learn things. Sometimes the answers fall into your lap. Life is a series of twists. It's, oh, who am I kidding? The human brain isn't built to process this. There is a way for all of this to work, and you aren't gonna like it. Oh dear Lord, don't you see? This is the most insane thing I am ever going to say, but trust me when I tell you that it's legit. This third film, it's all about family reunions. For the longest time, I thought Johan was Nigel's brother, and well, Johan isn't Dutch, this is discussed, but he's actually German, much like Frau in fact. Ooh, do I think Frau is tied in? No, dear child, it's much worse than that. I only wish it were that simple. A big plot twist is that Frau is actually a surprise mother. There was no unfortunate accident, as they parrot. Goldmember is Austin's mom. His skin is peeling, either from the car explosion or the makeup. The mother lost her mind because her husband was a swinger, faked her death in Belgium. It was her idea. She is flexible. She has a high-pitched voice. She has no burnt junk, just a legit key. She has the same birth date as the others. She was a spy, an identity-swapping madwoman. She looks like her kids. I'm sorry I've had to bestow this revelation upon you, but I think it might just be true. So I looked and looked. All we need is one solid consistency, one solid link, one... Holy shit, they have the same bracelet. You were warned. You were given a warning to back out, but you chose death. You learned the truth about Johan, the terrible truth, the devastating reality of Nigel's life, of his sad situation. You will now suffer the consequences of your bravery, because Austin's mom's name is Joan. That there's my theory on Austin Powers, at least my first one, and, well, you were warned. You can cut off your threshold of believability at whatever point in the video you choose, but all of it has evidence, and it is all legit, of course, although I couldn't find an exact origin on Joan's name. Same goes for Fat Bastard being named Stuart Hope, apparently. I do believe those names come from the bonus disc, most likely, so check around. But multiple wikis and sources say that it's the case. I just couldn't find the disc. I also asked Mike Myers about it, but nothing yet. Not that he'd answer, given I've now discovered the truth. Once again, please do help out on Patreon. I'll link it now. That is saving my life. Even if it's for the free tier, everything's important. Thank you all, and until next time,
That's not your mother, it's a man, baby!
And of course, an extra special thanks to the patrons Plasmite and Morialty to Biggity Boopop, Sangalanga Futog Leg Eater, doing Grandma Mort's third cousin inside a jar, peas, and John Cena's da-da-da.